Alright guys, welcome and thank you for joining me as we end our discussion. This is it. This is the final movie in the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy that we are talking about, The Dark Knight Rises. I honestly probably haven't watched this movie since it came out in theaters in 2012, maybe even in 2013. So I didn't really remember much about this movie going into it, and the first thing that really stuck out to me is that even though this movie is released 4 years from The Dark Knight from 2008 to 2012, it's set 8 years in the universe. Bruce Wayne has now become a recluse who's hidden himself away from the public eye. Batman is now a fugitive accused of murdering Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent is seen as a hero. They even give him his own Harvey Dent Day. There's the Dent Act that has put all the prisoners away in Gotham without any chance of parole. And the city of Gotham is pretty well cleaned of its crime problem. But when mercenary and terrorist Bane comes to Gotham with plans of destroying it, the Batman must rise up once again to save his city once and for all. Alright, so starting off with what I really liked about The Dark Knight Rises is actually a lot to do with Bruce Wayne. Now, Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne in this trilogy up until this point, I haven't really been that attached to the guy. I think he does a good job as Batman. But with The Dark Knight Rises, I think this is Christian Bale's best performance, and I think they do the most with Bruce Wayne in this movie than they've ever done, maybe since Batman Begins. Because you got Bruce Wayne, it's 8 years later since his 1 year as Batman, but that 1 year as Batman has torn and worn on his body so much. He needs a cane now to walk. He's got no cartilage in his legs. He's bruised, he's battered. He legitimately looks like a weak, broken down old man. Okay, maybe he doesn't look like an old man, but he definitely does look weak and broken down. And the way that he's shunned himself away from society, you look around this guy's house, it looks like he's already living as a dead person. There's sheets everywhere covering up all the furniture. It does not look like a place someone is living in. So when Bruce Wayne gets word of Bane coming into the city, this terrible threat against Gotham, I really loved watching Bruce build himself back up. The challenges and trials that he had to go through to get his body back into shape to put on the cape and cowl. It's the most invested I've been in a Bruce Wayne character arc in these movies since he first was on the road to becoming Batman in Batman Begins. The Dark Knight Rises has some of the most recognizable Batman stuff that I associate with the character of Batman in it. We get some more time with Bruce and Alfred down in the Batcave as Bruce is investigating what's going on with Bane, who he is, where he's coming from. He's investigating Selina Kyle, played by Anne Hathaway, they introduced into this movie, and we'll talk about her more in a minute. But I just really love the interaction between Bruce and Alfred in this movie. Michael Caine is an actor in this series I haven't really been given my credit to. He has been a fantastic Alfred, and in this movie, he has my favorite Alfred scenes in the entire trilogy. That scene where Bruce is getting ready to get back into the Bat outfit and Alfred tells him he hoped that he would never hear from Bruce Wayne again, but sometime in the future he would be in a cafe across the world and he would just look over at the table and see Bruce sitting there with a wife and a child. And when Alfred is telling Bruce that if he's going down the road of being Batman again, Alfred's not going to stick around. He's not going to bury another member of the Wayne family because he believes this road of Batman leads to Bruce's death. He actually believes this is what Bruce wants the outcome to be. That goodbye scene between Alfred and Bruce actually brought a little tear to my eye. The way that Michael Caine delivered that scene through his performance, you truly believe that he's almost saying goodbye to his son. This kid that he's raised all the way up until this point, watching him go on this path of destruction. It was some of my favorite stuff between these two in the entire trilogy. Speaking of performances, we've got a couple of newcomers into this movie with Anne Hathaway as Selina Kyle, aka the Catwoman, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt as the cop, John Blake. Now, I'm not going to talk much about Joseph Gordon-Levitt, not because he's not doing a good job in the movie. I think he does fine, but he's just kind of a generic cop character who, alongside Batman, is investigating Bane on his own. He's kind of the underdog of the police department that we're supposed to root for. But he just didn't really leave that much of an impression on me. I felt like he could have been played by anybody else. And I'm not saying that you could cut him out of the movie entirely, but if you did, it definitely would be a little shorter. But the new standout by far is definitely Anne Hathaway as Catwoman in this movie. I really liked her portrayal as Catwoman. She plays Catwoman as a con artist, and the way that Anne Hathaway is able to flip a dime on her performance, I love the way that she just makes herself seem like the victim whenever she's screwing someone over. Like the scene where she's selling the fingerprints of Bruce Wayne and she calls the cops during the deal, and when the cops bust in, she acts like she's in peril, like she's just there as an innocent bystander. I loved it. I thought she was great, and she really pulls off the action sequences as well in this movie. I don't know if it's all her or if she had some stunt doubles, but you totally believe that she is this tough girl who can defend on her own, hold her own, and take down a lot of these bigger guys than her. Her performance was great. Her physicality was great. I love the way that her and Christian Bale play off of each other, because Batman and Catwoman always kind of have this like sexual tension going on between them, and I really got that through the performances of Christian Bale and Anne Hathaway as these characters. I definitely felt more chemistry between these two characters than I've ever felt between Bruce and Rachel, but I honestly felt a connection between the two. It's actually kind of heartbreaking when Catwoman turns Batman over to Bane. And before we get to that scene, this is a good time to bring up Bane, our new baddie played by Tom Hardy. Now, when I first watched this movie back in like middle school, I didn't really know who Tom Hardy was. Now, all these years later, I know who Tom Hardy is, and watching The Dark Knight Rises after seeing the Venom movies, it is so crazy to see the differences of performances that Tom Hardy is able to pull out. I mean, the fact that this guy...
Talking about aliens, like aliens.
E.T. photo of aliens.
is played by the same dude as this guy.
No, you stay here. I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?
I've paid you a small fortune.
This gives you power over me?
It just kind of boggles my mind, but I really like Bane as the follow-up character to the Joker, because if the Joker in this trilogy was the intellectual challenge for Batman, Bane is now the physical challenge for Batman. Not that he's dumb, Bane is incredibly smart in this movie too, but you just look at the dude and he just looks like a beast, and when you get him in a cage match against Batman, you totally believe that he can kick Batman's butt. And he totally does. The scene where Bane and Batman first face off in the sewer is probably my favorite hand-to-hand combat scene throughout the entire trilogy, because Batman just gets his butt kicked. He's the underdog in this fight. He can't hold himself against Bane. Bane is just pounding on him every chance he gets. Batman can hardly get a punch in. And of course it ends with that iconic moment.
Ah, yes. I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit? Or your body?
But that scene really is the lowest point for Batman in this film, in this trilogy as a whole. And it really helps you to feel that physical threat that Bane is, to the point that when Bruce Wayne is thrown into that pit of despair, both literally and figuratively, you're just rooting for this guy to get back up and go back and kick his butt and take back his Gotham. That's another thing about The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises' scope and scale is so much bigger than The Dark Knight and Batman Begins. You get to see a lot more of Gotham as Bane takes it over and turns it into that island that no one can penetrate and get in, and if anyone tries to leave, he's got a nuclear bomb that he's ready to explode. Because I guess I should mention that Bane is part of the League of Shadows, which I didn't really care for the League of Shadows in Batman Begins, but thematically through this trilogy, it's a really nice way to wrap up this entire story arc, because Bane wants to complete what Ra's al Ghul tried to do, and that is destroy Gotham. Only instead of doing something stupid like vaporizing water so that people see their greatest fears and I guess kill each other, Bane's just gonna blow the thing up with a nuclear bomb. A much better plan if you ask me. And the big action final act of this movie of Batman versus Bane and Catwoman and all of his team, Gordon, trying to take back Gotham from Bane and his goons. You get a lot of great action in this movie, not just in that final end, but there's also a fantastic pod chase scene where the cops are trying to get Batman once he resurfaces for the first time in 8 years. Just going from Batman Begins to Dark Knight and then to this movie, the amount of action and the scale of it just kind of blew my mind. That is one thing about this movie. It does kind of lose a little bit more of its realistic feel than the rest of the trilogy has, because you do get more fantastical elements within The Dark Knight Rises, especially when it comes to Batman's tech. Like, the bat that he has in this movie is super cool, but I totally no longer believe that this is a real world whenever he's flying around in that thing. Now, to my surprise, online, I've seen a lot of controversy surrounding Dark Knight Rises. A big reason that I see for that is that there's a lot of plot holes in The Dark Knight Rises, and I guess that is true. The biggest one that everyone seems to have a problem with is the way that Bruce Wayne gets back into Gotham when no one's supposed to be able to get in or out. And I can see where people are coming from with that one, but there's been a lot of scenes in movies where a place that's impenetrable has been broken into by our main characters, and Batman's supposed to be like a really great ninja, so I can buy that he found a way to get into Gotham. My big thing is also how he gets back to Gotham from where he was in the pit, and he's supposed to be broke, so how exactly did he get from Asia or wherever he is back to Gotham? I don't know. I've also seen the question online of whether or not Batman is actually alive at the end of this movie, and if the movie's actually left ambiguous. Because at the end of the movie, Alfred does in fact go to the cafe that he told Bruce that he always went to, hoping that he would see Bruce with a wife and kids, and he sees Bruce sitting there with Selina Kyle. And my big thing about that is that if Alfred was indeed hallucinating or imagining Bruce Wayne, why would he imagine him there with Selina Kyle? I don't know, that just doesn't make sense to me. There's also some things in The Dark Knight Rises that get a little bit more goofy than the rest of the trilogy has been up until this point. Throughout this trilogy up until this point, I have not minded the Christian Bale Batman voice, but I will admit in this movie, at times his Batman voice does make Batman seem a little bit goofy. When Batman is yelling at Bane during their final confrontation, I honestly kind of burst out laughing. It is so funny.
Where is it? You never give it to an ordinary citizen. Where is it? Where's the trigger?
And Miranda Tate's death scene is honestly one of the worst death scenes I've seen in a movie.
My father's work is done.
It looks like what a child does when they're pretending to play dead. I can see where people are coming from with some of their complaints of The Dark Knight Rises. The script is definitely the loosest of the trilogy, but I still think it's a very good movie filled with great performances, some of my favorite moments throughout the entire trilogy. I think it wraps up well, gives a great ending to all these characters that we followed, wraps up the trilogy in a nice bow thematically. And at 2 hours and 45 minutes, I was enthralled throughout the entire thing. The pacing was great. The action set pieces are very exciting, well crafted, well shot. Does it have some story conveniences, story nitpicks, and some plot holes? Absolutely. But I had a great time watching this movie, and I have absolutely no hesitation saying that I would definitely recommend The Dark Knight Rises. And with that, guys, that has completed our journey through the Nolan trilogy. Much like The Dark Knight, I didn't say everything I had to say about The Dark Knight Rises. It is a very long movie, so that's where you guys come in. Comment down below, let me know all of your thoughts on The Dark Knight Rises and the Nolan trilogy in general. The Batman is releasing this weekend. Unfortunately, theaters is still not an option where I live. So all of you guys who are going to see the Batman, I hope you have a great time watching it. And I will talk about it with you guys as soon as I can. Until then, guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video, checking out my channel, and joining me for these Nolan reviews. If you haven't yet and you like talking all things movies, TV, and all things entertainment, why don't you go on and click that subscribe button, click that like button, click that notification bell, all that YouTube stuff. And I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.